The Battle of Endor is not only one of the greatest sequences in Star Wars history, but is chock full of fun details for those with a keen eye to notice. Today we'll be covering 5 of my absolute favorite. I don't want to waste any time though, so let's get started. First off, we have something that you may already know if you watched my TikTok/YouTube short today, and that's the extra rationale behind the death of the Executor. Now everyone knows that Admiral Akbar calls out for the Rebel fleet to attack the Executor before the Super Star Destroyer crashes. However, there's another detail that I think far less of you probably noticed, and that's the fact that as the Super Star Destroyer is crashing, you can see that not only has the vessel suffered damage to its bridge, as we see with Arvel Crynid, but also its engines. The fact that the engines are dead helps give some extra explanation for why command of the Super Star Destroyer couldn't be moved to some secondary bridge before the ship crashed. The vessel was way too close to the Death Star, and as somebody on my Twitter put it quite well, it was really a death by 1,000 cuts type of thing. Now, if you go into the expanded universe, especially the Revenge of the Sith novelization, there is some more details, including the fact that the ship's guidance systems were down and that it actually crashed into several vessels on its plunge towards the Death Star, but I really want to focus on movie details for today's video. Alright, at number 2, we have the little Nebulon B that could. So there's one very brief scene during the height of the Battle of Endor when we can see this one Nebulon B squaring off at knife point basically with what initially looks to be a Star Destroyer. Now obviously, knowing what we know about a Nebulon B, and especially given the fact that the one Nebulon B we've really seen before this point is a medical frigate, this is a battle that it's not really suited for. But this isn't actually a Star Destroyer. Based on my analysis, this is actually the Executor itself, and there are several things that lead me to believe this. First of all, let's just get it out of the way. The scale is wrong. The scale is wrong whether it's a Star Destroyer or whether it's a Super Star Destroyer. That's nothing new for Star Wars, especially when it comes to the Battle of Endor and models. I mean, there's weird scaling issues in just this scene alone. Look at that weird, very small CR-90 that's sort of just floating there. For context, the CR-90 is like half the size of a Nebulon B. But there are a few things that lead me to believe this is the Executor. First of all, if you look at sort of the rim or the trench that goes around the ship, this matches pretty closely with what we see, especially in that brief scene of The Empire Strikes Back, whereas the trench, I've heard some people call it the Oreo trench, funny enough, that goes around the regular Star Destroyer has less detailing and greebling on the inside. There aren't as many of these square modules, but there's something I think that's more definitive, and that's the use of the blue lighting. In Return of the Jedi, the Executor is very, very blue. You can see it especially in the scene when it crashes. Regular Star Destroyers, as you can see probably most clearly in this first scene with the Avenger, don't have the same blue light, certainly not around the trench of the ship. And another good scene you can use as a comparison is the one where they're approaching Endor and the Executor is sort of sitting in orbit. You can see that there's a very distinct lighting pattern, which you can see on a smaller scale in this image. So this Nebulon B, this very brave Nebulon B, is actually broadsiding the Executor, and I think if the vessel actually survived this encounter, I don't know if it's supposed to be the Redemption, which is the medical frigate from Empire Strikes Back in canon that actually survives the battle, and Legends it's destroyed by the Death Star. All in all, though, a very interesting scene, and a good look at how weird some of the models were in this movie during the battle. Speaking of models, this third one is one that my fellow ship lovers will enjoy. I mean, this whole video really is for us. And I want to talk specifically about the different models of Mon Calamari cruiser that you can actually see at the battle. And I don't even want to focus on the unknown Mon Calamari vessels, like the frigate that E.C. Henry has talked about in a video in Model. Very cool, I'll link that down below. But rather the more highly detailed Rebel ships. And a lot of people assume it's just the Liberty or the Wing type cruiser and the Home One type cruiser, but that's actually not true. TheForce.net is famous for really well documenting the different ships in Star Wars, and this is especially true in my opinion for the Battle of Endor ships. It's got some nice detail about what they call sometimes the Pearly Wingless or just the Wingless Liberty. This ship basically takes the engine design and overall design of the MC-80 Liberty type, but removes the wings, so it's sort of a cross between the Home One frigate type and the Liberty. If you go to the website, which I'll link down below, it basically excerpts every time the ship appears on screen, which is very cool. The best look, however, is probably actually from right before the battle starts when it's in formation, and you can see there how it's not the Independence type or the Home 1 type, which is to its left, but it's also not the Liberty. Alright, continuing on the topic of ships, next up we have the strange Star Destroyers of Endor, and there are two in particular. I only want to touch on them very briefly. The first is a Star Destroyer with a very large tower, and Wikipedia actually does a good job of showing how large this is by pointing out the size of the Avenger compared to the Millennium Falcon in The Empire Strikes Back. And this thing is just huge, as is the Mon Calamari cruiser over it. Some people have suggested that maybe this is the Pride of Tarlandia, which is a battle cruiser that was supposed to be at Endor, but of course we never see. It could be. For me, it's just weird scaling though. And in reality, what happened is that this was an extra detailed version of just a command tower, so that's probably why the scaling got a little screwed up. The second weird Star Destroyer is what's been now retconned to be the Detector. For me, this was always a weird one. Whenever I'd watch this scene as a kid, in particular this one scene where the Millennium Falcon takes a long fly over a Star Destroyer, I always assumed it was just the Falcon flying over the nose of a ship. However, the ship is missing the Star Destroyer style terraces, and if you look closely, as I pointed out in a video I did all about the Detector, this is actually a very weird model. We're looking at the underside of a Star Destroyer. You can see this sort of negative space that the Star Destroyer has. Maybe that's where the tractor beam projector goes or something similar. However, as you continue over the ship, where the hangar would be, there's just extra armor plating. I have no idea how this came about. I'm assuming they wanted a scene where the ships just flew over a Star Destroyer, and it looked really cool to not have the terraces in the way and have the Falcon do this long shot. So basically then they repurposed the bottom of a Star Destroyer so the scene would flow a little nicer. And then of course the lore came, and the Detector was created as basically a capital ship killing Star Destroyer, which instead of having a hangar had extra weaponry and armor. It's a bit weird because that assumes that the ship is flying quote-unquote upside down in the middle of battle. Now of course that's meaningless in space, but in Star Wars I can't think of another occasion where a single ship in the middle of a larger battle is oriented differently unless there's some big tactical thing going on. Alright, so let's get to the final detail, and I'm not sure how I'm going to title this video, but this is less of a crazy detail about the Battle of Endor and more just an interesting sort of editing quirk. Although I guess that's sort of true for the last one as well. This is one that probably some of you will know, but there was recently some archival footage from the filming of Return of the Jedi released. There was actually a lot more sort of personal stuff about the space battle. There was a scene with gunners on the Millennium Falcon. I believe those deleted scenes maybe exist on the DVD, but there were also footage of 3 female pilots who would have belonged to the rebellion that never made it to the movie, all except for one. This A-Wing pilot, who in both canon and legends is known as Celia Cott, was portrayed by a woman, specifically British actress Poppy Hands, but was then dubbed over by a man.
3 from above. Red 3, red 2, pull in. Got it.
And when I saw this as a kid, I always remembered that pilot because they were visually distinctive. But yeah, it's because she's a woman. Now, I don't actually think her voice was removed because she's a woman. I think it's because her original take has a British accent.
Rhythm coming in 20 degrees.
I'm on it, Red Leader.
I'm on it, Red Leader.
There's too many of them.
There's too many of them.
You're taking a lot of fire. Back off.
You're taking a lot of fire. Back off.
It's a bit more appropriate, I think, for an Imperial who often do have that accent. I do think it's kind of unfortunate that she didn't make it in, however, because the Rebel Alliance would be using pretty much any person or alien they get their hands on and to throw into a cockpit. I think that's something Rogue One did well, for example. But yeah, those are 5 interesting details and 5 little Easter eggs in the Battle of Endor. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I love watching the Battle of Endor. It was really fun kind of seeing what I noticed, and especially looking at that Nebulon B taking on the Super Star Destroyer. Which detail was your favorite? Is there something I missed? Do you think that was the Super Star Destroyer? Let me know all of that and more down below. Until next time though, guys, have a good one. Be safe. May the Force be with you.